But yeah, I'm right there with you, Brian. It's frustrating because some of them just sound like they show that they could have some sort of potential, and it's like it's one of those things where it's like the only thing we hear is like after careful review, like even like the NC Soft from via Reset Era, essentially what they said was they decided to cancel this game as a result of a feasibility review. So so I don't know what that means. The game wasn't feasible, but it's been in the works. So it's
could mean a number of things when it comes to like those internal reviews. All games go through this kind of internal review process with the studio and studio heads, and they're looking at what's it going to cost to bring it to the finish line? What's the scope of this project? How many more people would we need to bring on to release this in this generation? There's a lot of things that go into these internal reviews. Feasibility for me kind of screams scope and scale, and releasing on this hardware / with what money we have available.
Yeah. And longevity as well.
That's the thing too. Yeah. That's exactly it. It's like it's not just shipping the game. It's monitoring the fan base and drip feeding them content forever. Right? Until 7 years from now, you can be like, hey, we're making a sequel. Like you look at something like Overwatch, which like was tremendously successful for years and years. Overwatch 2 came out, didn't hit exactly the same. Halo Infinite at launch was like, I played it. It was fun. I played the single player campaign. It had a multiplayer mode that I enjoyed. Then I got my fill after about a month and a half, and I moved on. But the people kept playing it were like, where's the content? Where's the maps? Where's the skins? Where's the blah, 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 blah. Naughty Dog canceling The Last of Us multiplayer, like same deal. And that was the one that was supposed to have a sort of like a lot of narrative threads involved with it. And like, to me, had the most potential out of all of these, specifically because like The Last of Us has made
faction.
Yeah. Last of Us has been a great multiplayer game before. So I could sort of envision that. Horizon though is one of those things, and even God of War to a lesser extent, is like you play God of War because you want to be Kratos, and Kratos gets a whole bunch of different armor sets and weapons in the game. And you're good to go there. But like, how do you turn that into like, 15 different people playing, or, PvP, 1v1 or whatever it is. And they've
done that before. They did it. They did a multiplayer thing for, what was it? God of War, whatever, Ascension, I want to say.
Yeah,
on the PS3.
That felt like when everybody was like, oh, you pack in a multiplayer mode or whatever. But it's like
also I see your point there, especially with like a God of, like, how do you make that like a live service? Because like this is a game. The premise of this franchise is one guy who keeps going around killing all the gods. So how do you
asymmetrical multiplayer? Everybody else plays as gods, and Kratos has to kill all of them all at once. So there you go.
Okay, so only one person can be Kratos? Like,
yes,
I don't.
Everybody else gets to be the other.
And
gods.
What, you unlock different hats for the gods that you spend $15 on or whatever, like Kratos coins or whatever. Like
Kratos coins.
And like honestly, like even less to a lesser extent, Horizon, is that something that even remotely interests me in terms of like being a multiplayer thing. Right?
Like, I disagree. I think Horizon would have actually sung pretty well as an open world kind of like MMO multiplayer type experience. Maybe not MMO, but there's just so many like tribes and so many characters to like locations and stuff you could go to. Like, I could see Horizon before seeing a God of War.
Yeah, I definitely can see that, because there's so many characters in that world. Like very lively characters. Like it's very hard for me to envision that with God of War.
No, I feel you both. So I guess to clarify, like if it was like me and 5 friends teaming up against a giant dinosaur robot, that sounds fun, right? Like I get that. But if like the unlock is, a headband or whatever, or like a pouch, I'm just like, I don't know. I'd just rather play the single player game at that point. And so, I mean, like I feel like they've looked at these things and they tried them out and they got too deep and they were like, how do we get people to keep coming back for more? And then realizing they didn't have it. And Naughty Dog figured it out, and they figured it out with God of War and Horizon, that these things don't really make sense to get people to come back over and over again. And I think the Concord thing, like, I think it had them. I think it had everybody shook. Like, we've never seen anything like that on this scale in the games industry, where it came out, got decent reviews. People were like, "Yeah, it's pretty fun, but like it's starting to show some promise, but like, let's see what it looks like in a month or 2 or 3 months, 6 months, when it, starts to get more content and finds its sea legs and its audience. And then 15 days later, they were like, hey, this is gone. Like, it doesn't exist anymore. It's going back in the vault. And I don't think that's something you can magically fix just by throwing a recognizable IP's stickers all over it.
I agree.
Like,
yeah, no, that's been done already. I mean, look at Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. Look at Crystal Dynamics' Avengers game. Like, you can't just tacked on this famous IP that everyone knows, the household name, and just expect it to do well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not gonna lie though, I was fiending for that Spider-Man the Great Web game. I don't just like, because I'm thinking about like Into the Spider-Verse.
Yep.
I'm thinking about that, and I feel like there is a way that they could have done that, right? Just for it to kind of maintain that longevity, because like Spider-Man, previous video games, even the animated shows, he's known to team up with various other superheroes that are it's New York, for crying out loud. So there is a way where it's like, for this week, Doctor Strange shows up or something, and he's like, hey, what's up?
No, I feel you. I think that one had potential. But I do think that like the story of this generation, like even you bringing up Suicide Squad, Avengers from a couple years back, like it just feels like the story these days is spend way too much time and way too much money on a live service game that people don't want. And for every one successful one, it feels like there's 20 that fail or come out. Mm-hmm. And like the Suicide Squad's the perfect thing, where it's just like, oh, they're making a new game in the Arkhamverse. Awesome. What's it about? Oh, it's a multiplayer game about killing Batman. But you don't play as Batman? No, you play as the Suicide Squad. Why? Because that was a good idea 7 years ago when the first movie came out and made money. Okay, but what about now? Now people don't want it anymore, and we're sunsetting it. And also, Batman was a clone. What? Like, just to get to that, and even like the Avengers thing was just like, the Avengers are here. Oh yeah, do they look like the ones in the movie? Not at all. Okay. All right. Well,
have you ever been to San Diego Comic-Con? That
the issue I think a lot of the issues stem on these, especially take like Suicide Squad, Avengers. I think it's a marketing thing. They're not marketing these games properly, because as somebody who's put in hundreds of hours to both Avengers and Suicide Squad, the core game is solid. The problem is adapting that to a larger audience. This looter shooter RPG kind of team up mechanic works very well for that audience. The audience that likes those games plays those games for hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you're trying to introduce larger new swaths of audiences into these games to make Avengers or Suicide Squad big, like a Destiny or something like that, or a Borderlands, these games don't have that name recognition. They're totally hoping and banking on the IP itself that they have licensed to sell these gamers, these new consumers, to get in on this. But the problem is these games aren't marketed. People think when they're playing an Avengers game, they're going to go around and they're going to be like, oh, cool, I can go around as Hulk and I'm just going to do Hulk things. But, oh, I have to deal with all this gear and skill trees and stuff like that. They want, in Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, same thing with the Arkhamverse. They want that Arkham-style combat. They want that gameplay that they have been trained to expect from the studio for a decade plus. And when it comes out, it's like, oh, it's actually a looter shooter. It's not they didn't market it properly. They shouldn't have even connected it. They shouldn't have even said it was in the Arkhamverse to begin with. They should have separated themselves completely and then revealed through story and background stuff that, hey, this is a cool little sneak peek. This is me. I have no marketing background. Sure. This is how I would have. I think that the audience would have accepted it a little bit more, and if they would have marketed it differently instead of trying to really bank on their legacy as a Arkham studio when it comes to Rocksteady developing this. I think the games are solid. I think they have really good mechanics. I think their loops and content drip was a little bit lacking, and I think a lot of people will agree with that point. Obviously delays and shit happen, but I think the core experience was good. The problem is like the devil's in the details. A few little things, good or bad, will make or break your game. Yeah. And when those start to stack up, more and more people are going to see those. And if it's not more positive than negative, that's when you start to see declining numbers. That's when you start to see bad word of mouth getting around, bad preview, etc., etc. That type of stuff tends to happen.
Like as the the 4 regulars on this show, half of us played Kill the Justice League. You and me, Jada. I was right there. I wanted this game to do well. I really did. But as just like a hardcore comic book fan, I didn't like what I was seeing. And also, like, I love the Arkhamverse. Like, I feel like for me, I think the story, like you said, there's parts and pieces to this whole thing. The core mechanics, that's fine. For me, it was more so the story and the direction the story took. That's, if you're gonna have the Justice League in there, first off, I think it was kind of just like, I think we can curse. I heard y'all say shit before. I think it was bullshit the way that they just like it ended. Like the whole story is over now, and they were just a bunch of clones. I feel like that's like a cop out. That's something you would see.
Perfect way to describe it. Yeah.
I see. I personally
like a soap opera or something.
I don't think it's a cop out. I think it's being seen as a cop out because there were hints and stuff about that drop through. As somebody who's been playing it throughout multiple seasons and picking up on little details and stuff like that, it's not a cop out. I think it's seen as a cop out because it was received so poorly. And so now people are like, oh, they're just bending to the audience, where I think this was honestly the idea originally that Rocksteady had. And I think it's just now coming to fruition. But the problem is it took too long to get there.
But come on now, Jada, it's terrible though. It's terrible. Like these are clones. Come on, that's the best you could do. These are clones.
I mean, could they have
we got universes filled with different superheroes and supervillains. And you mean to tell me they were clones from this dude's spaceship?
Okay, let's you two could argue over the granular details of this game forever, and it is immensely entertaining. But I want to say that, like, if Spider-Man, The Last of Us, God of War, Horizon, Avengers, and to a lesser extent Suicide Squad, because they're not really household names outside of Harley Quinn, right? Can't hack it as a multiplayer live service game, then what is the lesson here? Because one of the most successful ones of the last year is Helldivers, which was not exactly, again, not a household name, not the kind of IP that like everyone really remembers fondly. It's a sequel to a game from ages ago, but it broke through. So like, what is the lesson here? Like what is
marketing?
Look
at how Helldivers was marketed. It came out with a very low, I wouldn't say low bar. I don't know what they spent on marketing for it, but they had a little bit of a snippet. I want to say like Gamescom the year before or Game Awards or something like that. Before launch, we got just a little snippet of it, and then they just kind of let their story kind of grow on its own.
Yeah,
they weren't trying to get everybody like, hey, from the legendary developers behind Helldivers 1, taking inspiration from Starship Troopers and blah blah. They didn't. There was no preconception from the audience coming into Helldivers 2, even though there was a Helldivers 1. The Helldivers 1 fans knew what to expect and loved what they were seeing, I imagine. But there was no preconceived misconception coming into this, like going into an Avengers, going into a Suicide Squad, going into a God of War, Horizon, etc., etc. These games that have these bigger names attached have to deliver 10 times more than something that is an unknown property.
It's a really good point, actually. Yeah. I hadn't really considered it that way. Like, it's less of an uphill battle because they're not a known quantity where you have very heavy expectations from the audience on how to deliver. Like Avengers specifically, and I think Spider-Man obviously is like, people go like, I know what that game looks like. So what's a multiplayer version of that look like?
Which is partially probably why those were the ones that got canceled and Concord got through, because it's like, they probably saw, how do we continue to support this for years to come? This is an ambitious project that we've taken on. How can we live up to what people are expecting from a God of War, from a Spider-Man, from a Horizon? So it kind of makes sense, and on looking at it from that direction.
And on the flip side, for Concord, look, that also, like Helldivers, didn't have a whole lot to your point, Akeem, didn't have a lot of a name brand recognition. But again, was marketed poorly.
Yes,
in my personal opinion.
100%.
Our first trailer, our first teaser was a cheeseburger. which had everybody kind of enthralled. What is this cheeseburger? What does this mean? Then they released this other little trailer, and it was all like cutscene and dialogue stuff, which was cool. And they were focusing a lot, and they were putting a lot of attention on that. But at the core, most members who were considering at that point buying Concord or jumping into it as their next big multiplayer shooter game needed to see more gameplay. And then the gameplay they showed off was just a little too chopped up, didn't do deep dives into the characters. It just kind of showed, it was chaotic. And like, I saw what it was because I'm experienced enough and I've seen enough of these type of shooters. I've been in the industry for long enough. I could see what they were cooking with this and where it was going to be. And then they did the beta, and I liked what I got hands on with, but not enough people did that because they weren't enticed enough by that initial teaser and trailer. They weren't enticed enough. So it was marketed. It just wasn't marketed well. They should have showed off the great gunplay. They should have showed off all the different characters, the classes, how to make their unique systems sing together in a comp format. They should have really done that.
It was a lot of like trying to make fetch happen, basically. Or it was like, hey, you know these guys, right? And I'm like, no, I don't. They're like, but they're cool, aren't they? Not really. But what about the gameplay? Does it look fun? No, it doesn't. Well, okay, we'll check it out because it's coming out soon and it costs us a lot of money.
Stay tuned months from now when they're in an episode of Secret Level.
It was like, why?
Yeah.
I really like, and this is me, like, I really liked Concord. I miss Concord. I will be on record of saying that. It was a great shooter. It had really great gunplay. It reminded me of a lot of old school shooters. But the problem is, it obviously failed to find an audience, and it was marketed poorly. So like, I can look at it critically, despite really enjoying the game. I can see I see why it failed. There's a lot of reasons why, but you know, I'm happy I at least got the experience with it.
I will say, I don't want to keep dunking on this game because everyone already has, but I will say that this could have been like the tightest, most incredible story-driven single-player game ever made, and aesthetically, those costumes just look like you went into the prop closet and you found 5 things and you put them on. Like it looks like how
I liked how goofy the game was. Like, that's just me, because every other game tries to do this super cool, super hyper realistic, whatever. I liked the kind of goofy look because it was different, and I'm tired of seeing the same shit in every other game.
I'm cool with that. Like I see what you're saying. Like I'm equally fatigued of like the bro military like fetishism aesthetic, because that's everywhere too. Like even like the MCU is just like mostly guys wearing just like pouches and gunmetal, and I'm just like, man, I don't know, give me street level Spider-Man just fighting up some bad guys or whatever in his classic costume. Just give me that. I don't need like the whole Teflon tentacles or whatever. Like, but I'm extremely boring and simple when it comes to stuff like that, comic book characters. I'm like, I like one flavor. But no,
I'm obsessed with cool costumes.
Yeah. The thing I keep coming back to is I want more Spider-Man Miles Morales. I want more Uncharted The Lost Legacy. I want more like, you know, put a team in the studio on a 7 to 12-hour game, you know, that you can roll credits in 7 hours, but it takes you 10 or 12 to 100% and find everything. Or, you know, 10 to 15 or something like that. Like The Last of Us Part 2 is like 22 hours long. Like God of War Ragnarok is too long. Spider-Man 2 was too long. Make these games shorter and put out more of them. And like, if you're going to have half your studio gamble on a casino construction for 6 years, and then you're going to tear the building down before anybody can go into it, then at least have another side of the studio working on a smaller game that keeps the IP going, that keeps story-driven single-player, third-person action games successful and popular, and keeps people like us enthralled in these games. Like, I loved the Last of Us DLC that they did between the first and second game. I loved Spider-Man Miles Morales. I love the idea of like taking these characters and these engines, maybe even some assets. You got some trees left over and some buildings. I don't give a shit. Reuse them. Give me a new story. Give me a new adventure, some new power-ups, some new collectibles. It doesn't have to be something that happens every 10 years and takes 25 hours to beat. Give me shorter games that cost less and put them out more often.